The machines in that hospital room would not stop beeping. One steady, one uneven, one frighteningly slow. He stood between his daughter's beds, holding both their hands, and for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. Outside, a storm pounded the windows. Inside, time was slipping away. If you believe in the power of real voices and real stories, take a moment to subscribe to the Black Voices. Like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this remind us that we're never as alone as we think. He had always been the strong one, the steady one, the kind of father who worked long shifts and still came home with enough energy to sit on the floor and braid his youngest daughter's hair, even though he never quite got it right. He lived in a modest brick house on the south side of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy. A small front porch with 2 plastic chairs, a narrow driveway, a backyard where the grass never seemed to grow evenly. But inside that house, there was laughter, music in the kitchen on Saturday mornings, the smell of pancakes and cinnamon, 2 girls who believed their dad could fix anything. His name didn't matter as much as the way he carried himself. Broad shoulders, quiet voice, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. After his wife passed away 3 years earlier from a sudden brain aneurysm, he had become mother and father all at once. He learned how to pack school lunches without forgetting the fruit. He memorized spelling words. He sat in the front row at dance recitals with red, tired eyes and clapped louder than anyone else. His oldest daughter was 12, smart, protective, the kind of child who watched over her younger sister like a second parent. The youngest was 8, sensitive, always, drawing pictures of their family with big smiles, and even bigger suns shining overhead. They were his whole world. The night everything changed started like any other. Homework spread across the kitchen table, the television murmuring in the background. He noticed his youngest rubbing her stomach again. She'd been complaining for weeks. Fatigue, headaches, a strange rash that wouldn't go away. Doctors had run tests. More tests, then more. He tried not to panic. Tried not to let his mind wander to places it didn't need to go. Kids get sick, he told himself. Kids bounce back. But then his oldest started getting tired too. She stopped finishing her dinner. She said her legs felt weak. One afternoon, she fainted in the hallway at school. The phone call came while he was on break at the warehouse. He drove faster than he ever had in his life. The diagnosis came in pieces. Quiet conversations in white hallways. Doctors using words that sounded too heavy to belong to children. A rare autoimmune disorder. Aggressive, unpredictable. Both girls had it. It was genetic. It had been sleeping inside their bodies for years. He sat there in a stiff chair, hands clasped, trying to understand how something invisible could take over 2 bright lives so quickly. He asked about treatment, about survival rates, about hope. There were options, they said. But time mattered. The disease was attacking their organs without an advanced treatment plan that included an experimental therapy not fully covered by insurance. Their chances would shrink fast. The number they told him felt unreal. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. He worked overtime, sold his truck and bought a cheaper car, started a fundraiser online even though pride made it hard. He hated asking for help. But when it comes to your children, pride doesn't stand a chance. Neighbors donated what they could. $20, $50, $100. His church held a small bake sale. His co-workers passed around a jar in the break room. The community tried. But medical bills don't wait for bake sales. As weeks passed, the girls grew weaker. Their hospital visits became longer. The house grew quieter. The kitchen table stayed clean because there was no homework to spread out. Instead, there were pill bottles, appointment cards, insurance statements stamped with words like denied and pending. At night, after the girls fell asleep, he would sit alone in the living room, the television off, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. He would stare at the wall and whisper to his wife, asking her what to do, asking her how to carry something this heavy. The day both girls were admitted at the same time was the day the fear became real. The doctors' faces were tighter, their voices softer. They moved quickly but carefully, like people walking on thin ice. He stood between their hospital beds, one hand holding each daughter. He told them stories about when they were babies, about how the oldest used to refuse to sleep unless he hummed off key, about how the youngest once tried to flush her socks down the toilet because she thought they were too itchy to live. They smiled faintly. The machines kept beeping. A social worker came by with a folder and a gentle expression. She explained programs, grants, waiting lists. He nodded, absorbing every word, but he could see it in her eyes. The system was slow. The disease was not. That night, the storm rolled in. Thunder shook the building. Rain streaked down the glass. The hospital corridors were quieter than usual. He hadn't left their side in nearly 20 hours. Nurses brought him coffee he didn't drink. Around midnight, the youngest began struggling to breathe. Not dramatically, just enough to make his heart race. Doctors rushed in, adjusted medications, spoke in low tones. He pressed his forehead against her small hand and told her she was strong, that she was brave, that Daddy was right there. On the other side of the room, his oldest watched with wide, terrified eyes. He walked over and kissed her forehead too, telling her everything would be okay, even though he wasn't sure what that meant anymore. And that was the moment he broke. Not loudly, not with shouting, just silent tears sliding down his face as he stood there, feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. He stepped out into the hallway to catch his breath, leaned against the cool wall, closed his eyes. A nurse he hadn't met before approached him slowly. She was older, gray hair pulled back neatly, calm presence. She didn't offer empty promises. She just stood beside him for a moment in silence. Then she said something simple. She told him that sometimes strength isn't about fixing the problem. Sometimes it's about letting other people carry it with you. He didn't respond right away, but those words stayed with him. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A local news station had somehow heard about his fundraiser. A short segment aired about a single father fighting for his daughter's lives. The footage showed him sitting between their beds, holding their hands. He hadn't agreed to be on camera. He didn't even remember the reporter being there long. But the story aired during the evening news, and people watched. Donations began to increase. Not thousands at first. Just steady. 100 here, 500 there. Messages poured in from strangers across the country. Parents who understood fear. People who had once needed help themselves. A retired teacher mailed a check with a note saying she had no children of her own. But if she did, she would hope someone would stand up for them like this. A group of high school students organized a car wash. A small business owner offered to match donations for a weekend. He sat in that hospital chair, phone in hand, overwhelmed not just by the money but by the messages. People he would never meet were rooting for his daughters. The experimental treatment required travel to a specialized hospital in Chicago. The funds were still short, but closer than they had ever been. Doctors coordinated. Paperwork moved faster once attention grew. Then came another moment no one expected. A quiet man in a worn baseball cap walked into the hospital room one afternoon. He introduced himself as someone who had seen the news story. He didn't stay long, didn't want attention. He simply handed over an envelope and said he had lost his own child years ago. He knew what helpless felt like. He said if there was even a small chance these girls could live full lives, that chance mattered. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check large enough to close the gap. The father couldn't speak. He tried, but words didn't come. He just hugged a stranger in the middle of a hospital room. Within days, arrangements were made. An ambulance transported the girls to Chicago under careful supervision. He followed behind in his old car, knuckles white on the steering wheel, whispering prayers into the quiet hum of the highway. The treatment was intense, long hours, side effects that made his daughters too tired to talk. But slowly, markers began to change. Numbers on screen shifted in the right direction. There were setbacks, fevers that spiked suddenly, scares that brought everyone rushing back into action. But this time, hope was not something fragile and distant. It was present, small, growing. He never left their side. Weeks turned into months. The hospital room in Chicago began to feel strangely familiar. Nurses learned the girls' favorite cartoons. Doctors explained progress with cautious optimism. One afternoon, his youngest asked when they could go home and sit on the porch again. He smiled and told her soon, not as a promise he wasn't sure of, but as something that finally felt possible. The day they were discharged, the sky was clear. No storm, just quiet sunshine spilling across the parking lot. He helped them into the car carefully like they were made of glass. The road back to Ohio felt different than the drive there, lighter, not because the fear was gone completely, but because it no longer owned them. Recovery wasn't instant. There were follow-up visits, medications, therapy sessions to rebuild strength. But the house slowly filled with life again. Homework returned to the kitchen table. Music drifted through the hallway. The porch chairs were replaced with sturdier ones. Neighbors stopped by more often. The community that had carried them through the darkest season didn't disappear once the crisis passed. Months later, he stood in the backyard, watching his daughters chase each other across the uneven grass. Their laughter rose into the warm evening air. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe deeply without fear tightening his chest. He thought about that night in the hospital, the storm pounding the windows, the machines beeping in uneven rhythm. He thought about how close he had come to losing everything, and he thought about the nurse in the hallway, who told him strength sometimes means letting others carry the weight with you. He used to believe being a father meant having all the answers. Now he understood it meant showing up, even when you're scared. It meant asking for help when pride whispers not to. It meant trusting that kindness still exists in a world that can feel unbearably harsh. Today, his daughters still attend checkups. The future will always hold some uncertainty. But it also holds birthday candles, school plays, porch mornings with pancakes and too much syrup. Their story traveled far beyond that hospital room. It reminded a community that compassion isn't just a feeling. It's an action. It's a check written quietly. A car wash organized by teenagers. A news story shared. A stranger who refuses to walk away. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. Tell us about a time someone helped carry your burden. Because when we listen to each other, when we show up for one another, we create something stronger than fear. And sometimes on the darkest nights, when the storm feels endless and the machines won't stop beeping, it's the voices of others that keep hope alive.